Hey everybody, welcome back to Philosophy Jam. We have an extra special episode today, or lecture, feature, I suppose. We're going to have my good friend and fellow philosopher, Jake Wojtowicz, Dr. Wojtowicz. He is from England, and we've been fast philosophical friends for quite a long time now. Today we're going to be discussing the meaning of life, and it's my hope that in this conversation you continue gaining a sense of what philosophers do and how they think about philosophy, and you also get a sense of maybe what the meaning of life could be and what various philosophers have said about it. So, Jake, what's the meaning of life?
Big question, Zach. I think it's got to be something to do with, when you think about the meaning of life, you've got to start from an enjoyable life, or a life which looks to be somewhat enjoyable. And I don't think all meaningful lives are enjoyable, and I also don't think all enjoyable lives are meaningful. But when we want to try and get a grip on it, when we're thinking about theory and stuff, we need to think, what seems like a good life to you?
Right.
What makes something meaningful? I think enjoyment's where you're going to start.
Good, yeah. So, I'm not sure
I don't mean like sex and beer. I mean,
right. So I'm wondering if at least a moderately enjoyable life is necessary for a meaningful life. So, could someone live a meaningful life if most of his or her experiences were pretty miserable?
I think if it's directed at something that they think is really important, I think it also has to be actually really important. They can't be wrong in that, then we might think it's meaningless.
Yeah.
But I think if you are sort of really trudging away at something that's actually genuinely important, and each of these steps you take, although painful, helps bring that about, I think that could be a meaningful life.
Yeah. So let's give examples, though. Like, what would be a meaningful pursuit like that? Philosophical investigation. That can be pretty tedious.
It's so boring. Yeah.
And it can be pretty miserable sometimes. Sometimes. Not all the time.
I was thinking something like a big political struggle.
For an important cause.
Yeah, I was just listening to the soundtrack to Les Mis.
Yeah.
You know the Les Mis, the rough plot? I
actually don't, I'm embarrassed to say. Yeah.
It's good. You should watch it and listen to it, and you should too. It's really good. I don't even like musicals, but you should. So there's a character, Marius. So it's set in the French Revolution, or a French Revolution. I don't think it's the French Revolution. And there's this character, Marius, who's sort of really keen on helping the revolution, and then a girl comes along, Cosette, and he sort of falls for Cosette, and then sort of by the end of it, he's back living with his rich uncle and has this big society wedding to Cosette. And I think he's this sort of, I don't often use this term, but I think he's a class traitor and should be the first to go when the revolution comes. But I sort of think he is not the kind of person who could live that kind of life. But some of his comrades, some of the people who are struggling for this revolution, they're going to be living their lives just dedicated to this cause, and the cause is going to overwhelm every other aspect. And they sort of they mock him for his desire for this girl, and you can see why, because their sort of life is subsumed into this one project of fighting for justice or something. And I can imagine their lives can be pretty miserable, but perhaps more meaningful than Marius is, because Marius is just this class traitor who chases a girl, joins the fight, whereas they're joining something they think's important, and they all die. So
Okay, so then let me re-ask my first question, but in a modified form. So then, do we need meaningful pursuits in order to lead a meaningful life? Is that a necessary condition?
I think so. So Susan Wolf, I think, gets this pretty spot on. She thinks that a meaningful life is a sort of subjective enjoyment. I think she says enjoyment, but maybe something is maybe subjective commitment or something, because you might not have to be enjoying it, but you might have to be committed to it, of something that's objectively meaningful. So the thing, you must be committed to doing it, and also the thing you're doing must matter in some way.
Good.
So I think if you the philosophers love the blades of grass counter.
I was just going to give that example. Exactly. I just want to say it now to be really clear about what this example is. So you can imagine someone who subjectively loves counting the blades of grass on his lawn, and he finds it to be an extremely meaningful pursuit. He says his life is better because of this project. But of course, it seems like it seems to sort of further this point or demonstrate that we need an objective element in order to live a good life. There needs to be something objectively good about the things that we pursue in order for the life to be meaningful. The blades of grass counting example being clearly a trivial and not objectively good thing to pursue.
That's a total waste of time. His life might be enjoyable.
Right.
His life might be good in several respects.
Right.
Is it meaningful?
Right. So we need...
Same with the person who just has lots of sex.
Good.
I mean, it might be meaningless.
Good. So we need the pursuit of objective goods in order to have a meaningful life. Follow-up question from that. Is the pursuit of meaningful or objectively good things, say political causes, or maybe art, or meaningful human relationships, I think that those would probably all be examples. Maybe even philosophy. Is the mere pursuit of those sufficient, then, to live a meaningful life? Is that all that we need in order to have a meaningful life?
That's a good question. I suspect sometimes the pursuit can be sufficient.
Yeah.
But other times you need success.
Yeah.
And I think a successful pursuit will almost always mean your life is more meaningful.
Yeah. Right. So you were drawing a distinction between an important life and a meaningful life.
Yeah.
And so the important life, as I understand you, requires successful pursuit, or no?
I think so.
Yeah.
So you, the guy who shot Gavrilo Princip, the guy who shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand,
Right.
had a really important life.
Right.
Like his or an impactful life, or whatever we want to say.
Right.
Was his life meaningful? Maybe, if his aim was to, bring down whatever political systems he was fighting against.
Right.
But there's, I think, a disconnect between how meaningful his life could have been and how important or impactful his life could have been. And I think that in some cases you can pursue something that doesn't come about, and it's meaningful because trying to do it is worthwhile. Whereas other things, they're only worthwhile if they come about. So like...
Good, yeah.
Another Bernard Williams example. An artist who fails to paint anything good.
Right.
Is that meaningful? Is it a meaningful existence to try and paint things and fail? I think no. Yeah, I can see there being cases where philosophy
success is needed.
Yeah.
In addition to the objective goodness of the pursuit.
Right. So being an artist, I think success is needed.
Yeah. Or a musician, I think, same sort of thing.
Maybe not with a philosopher. Maybe a philosopher, just thinking about these things is the success. Thinking about these things in a deep way.
I hope that's true for our sake.
But like actually getting the publications, or more importantly, actually being right isn't necessarily what matters. It's the...
Well, it couldn't be what being right, because pretty much every philosopher of history was wrong.
Well, we could just think that they all had meaningless lives.
That's right. No, but
We hope not.
I think I think we're really getting somewhere. Okay,
Yeah.
so to recap,
Yeah.
we think that meaningful life needs the pursuit of objectively good things, and depending on what those things are, we need some success at achieving them.
Yeah.
Or not. Some cases we
Yeah.
might not need that success.
But in lots of cases, you want success.
Right. I think with more of the moral pursuits,
Yeah.
success doesn't matter so much, strangely.
Right.
Like, I would want to think that in a world overrun by slavery,
Right.
even if you make no dent fighting against that slavery,
It's the fighting that.
it's
yeah.
the fighting that matters,
Yeah.
in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I think I agree. Yeah.
But then I agree with you about the artistic example, musical example. We probably do need some success in
Right.
those sorts of activities to have a meaningful life. So
I wonder why.
I wonder why too.
Yeah.
I think it may have to do with the intrinsic goodness or importance of those pursuits themselves. So I think we tend to think of moral pursuits and moral ends as having ultimate value, and they're
Yeah.
so worthy in and of themselves.
Yeah. Whereas art is.
It's
valuable,
good, but it's
so-
not as important, I think.
Yeah.
We often assume.
Yeah.
So maybe that has something to do with it. So I want to zoom out a little bit and actually provide a challenge to the account that we've developed thus far. Nagel, in his essay in particular on the absurd, which
Yeah.
my students will have read, and
Well.
also in the final. I think they have. I trust you guys.
We believe in you.
If you didn't read this essay, your life is going to be way less meaningful.
They should. Also, they're obliged to read it by being in your course. And they're
Exactly.
morally wrong.
Moral
themselves and you.
obligations, exactly.
So-
They're violating their moral obligations.
They're harming you.
Yes, don't harm me. Anyway, in that essay and in the final chapter of his book, What Does It All Mean?, which we're also reading as the course textbook, he questions whether even everything that we've said would allow for or conduce to a meaningful life, or necessarily result in a meaningful life. So even if we're pursuing something that's morally valuable or artistically valuable and we're successful, let's say, he thinks that we can zoom out and look at things from this very removed
Right.
perspective, right? He calls it, in the book, What Does It All Mean?, the perspective sort of from the outside,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of his work, he talks about this, the objective or the third personal viewpoint. And I think there is something kind of tempting to the idea, or something sort of maybe even troubling about the suggestion that we look at things from such a removed perspective, because when we do, it seems like maybe even pursuit of those moral goods and success at them doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
We are a blip in the cosmic scheme of existence. So does that really matter at the end of the day, what we achieve and what
Right.
we devote ourselves to?
Right. So the problem there is not that we don't enjoy anything or aren't committed to it. It's just that these things never matter.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Okay. So
An example he gives is, you could write a really famous work of literature
Yeah.
and it's read for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But then at some point it's no longer going to be read.
Right.
And at some point no human will even remember it, in all likelihood. And then in some point no human will be even around to appreciate it. So that seems to sort of erase the fire of meaning that we've sort of lit.
Sure. Yeah. If you zoom out to that level, nothing matters.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out to that level, there's no value anyway.
Right.
we're thinking about physics, we're thinking about, the heat death of the universe,
Yeah.
we're thinking about scientific facts, and
Right.
empirical facts,
Right.
and value just disappears at some level.
Right.
But that's not how we live our lives, even if we can think about them.
Right.
The way we live our lives is
Right.
we very much do think that some things matter and
Right.
some things don't.
Right.
And even if it turns out that everything, mattering is a human construct, if it turns out that mattering is a totally human construct, it still gives us a perspective to judge some lives as meaningful and others as not. It also gives us an incentive to pursue some rather than others, because we see them as meaningful too. It does give the grass counter a way out, though. The grass counter can say, well, okay, so ultimately nothing matters, and ultimately, however we want to make this subjective, right? They can say, look, it only depends upon human agreement and what these humans agree on. Well, I don't care. I disagree with you. I'm going to count my grass, and I think it's perfectly meaningful. And I think that's where the worry would creep back in.
Yeah.
Like, actually, why does the objective stuff matter?
Yeah. If on this cosmic level it doesn't.
Well, yeah, so it's more like we zoom out and we say, actually, zooming out isn't necessary, so let's zoom back in and get back to the human level.
Right.
But then we might worry that the human level, when we see it from the human level, we have to accept it's sort of ultimately subjective.
It's contingency or something.
Yeah, there's something there that might mean that we then have to let the grass counter back in as having a meaningful life. And we want to say, no, the grass counter might have an enjoyable life, but it's not meaningful. And then he could say, hold on a second, this is just this, what we think objectively matters is rubbish. Nothing objectively matters.
I would want to resist that conclusion. I don't want to let the grass counter back in.
But then there's another worry. You've got to let everyone out, because nothing matters.
Right. But here's what I would say in response. I think even if in some sense it doesn't matter on this cosmic level, nothing matters on this cosmic level, nothing's meaningful, I don't think that when we zoom back into the human level, things become subjective.
Right, okay.
I think we don't have to say everything's perspectival or relativized. We could say that they're still objective, but they're insignificant on a cosmic level.
Right.
Right?
So you've got to base them on like human goods or something.
Yeah.
Like the good human life.
Or even the good earthly life, like
right.
something even greater than us, like the good creaturely life or something. I don't know.
I mean, I've no idea how you're going to do that, but I mean, Aristotle tries and does a job of it.
Well,
and
we discussed relativism and realism the other day, so I'll leave my students to the task of figuring out an answer to this.
Yeah.
I think you can do it. Without going into why you can do it, we can avoid the grass counter, I think, assuming you can do it. We can keep him out. We can keep objective meaning or goods at the human level, and I think the Hegelian problem is still lingering in that even if we can do all that, there's a sense in which a lack of meaning at the cosmic level will bother us.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Nagel says that it makes our lives absurd, and this is his sort of Camus-inspired approach to things. He thinks that we just have to sort of deal with this discrepancy between our taking our lives very seriously at the human level, but then our ability to step back and recognize that it all might be meaningless at the cosmic level. And there's no real way to reconcile those perspectives, he says.
Yeah.
Maybe we just have to live with that absurdist conclusion. Just floating it out there for your thoughts.
I think he might be right. That we have to live with the conclusion that ultimately it might not matter, but that doesn't mean we can't still think that some lives are more meaningful than others.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean we can't give good reasons why. And I think we can give these good reasons why.
Yeah.
But this absurdist conclusions like sort of radical skepticism about epistemology or something.
That's what he says actually in,
Okay.
in the Absurd, his essay.
Yeah. But he likes comparing things to skepticism.
Yeah.
And I think that when you start thinking about radical skepticism, it can be really tempting to be like, yeah, this skeptic's right. But actually, you then have to think, is the skeptic actually right, or is the skeptic just throwing out this argument that sort of seems compelling, but maybe isn't actually that powerful when we think about sort of ordinary notions of knowledge,
Yeah.
and how we get through our lives?
Yeah.
And if we want to think about how we get through our lives in terms of meaningfulness and what we think matters, then maybe the absurdist sort of conclusion isn't that troubling, because
Yeah.
actually that's only a problem
in the
Firstly,
seminar room.
Firstly,
yeah.
it's only a problem in the seminar room, but also it's only a problem when you sort of put in these really high standards of what matters and what counts. Whereas we
So-
can give pretty good justifications for why art matters or why
Yeah.
philosophy matters.
So I should say, by the way, when we say this only matters in the seminar room, I'm talking about when we're doing philosophy, right? So when we're putting potentially extremely high standards on
Yeah.
justification or meaning
Yeah.
or proof and things like that, and as philosophers may tend to do. So I agree that the problem is only generated from this kind of external, sweeping, kind of cosmic perspective, similar to the problem of epistemological skepticism. It's only generated when we have these Cartesian level doubts about things, right? I don't think that makes the problem go away, though, and I actually think that, it's the job of philosophers to bring these sorts of worries into common sense and sort of penetrate and jumble up common sense and sort of shake our commonsensical foundations and intuitions and assumptions. So I think that applies to epistemological skepticism just as much as absurdism.
Right.
So maybe there is even a threat at this base layer.
Maybe, but here's a way of responding. When we're thinking about meaningful lives, why are we thinking about meaningful lives?
Right.
Because we want our lives to be meaningful.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure
Yeah.
that we don't end up
Yeah.
leading obviously unmeaningful lives like
Good.
the blade of grass captor.
Yeah.
And so then,
Yeah.
so we get a good answer
Yeah.
when we say, "Oh look, you've got to be committed to it. It's got
Yeah.
to be something you sort of
Right.
maybe enjoy, maybe are committed to."
Yeah.
Because it's got to matter. And
Yeah.
there's things that we enjoy that. So meaningfulness doesn't. So you can have a life that's really enjoyable, that's not meaningful.
Right.
Why do we want a meaningful life? Well, because sometimes we think that enjoyment isn't everything.
Right.
Because there's lots of things that are enjoyable that leave us feeling a bit shallow or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do they know about Nozick's experience machine?
They don't.
Okay.
No, we've done very little
Okay.
moral stuff.
But I kind of like that.
At
I
this point.
kind of
Yeah.
like the experience machine, which is just
Yeah,
that
bring it up. Yeah.
you get strapped into a machine, and it's almost like a video game. You can sort of choose the life you're going to live and how it's going to feel, and
And
your
it's
life
a totally immersive virtual experience. It simulates everything.
it feels like life.
Mhm.
And lots of people don't want to strap into that machine. So nothing actually will happen in that machine, but you'll think these things are happening. So you
Right.
could go on to become president or go on to own a big company or any of Donald Trump's dreams. You could do all these things
Right.
in the machine. And it doesn't actually happen, but it feels like it happens, and then you die at the end of
Right.
it. Or you play you can maybe play a few different lives or something.
Right.
And there's something shallow about that we don't want, because it seems to take away genuine human achievement.
Right.
But why do these things count as genuine human achievement, and how should we respond to the fact that we don't want to be in the machine and do think that some things are more important than subjective enjoyment, just pleasure or whatever?
Yeah.
And the answer seems to be we need to work out what is worth doing
Yeah.
as well. So, I mean, that's another really big question that we've not really touched.
Right.
Because it's a big question. You know, what is worth doing?
Yeah.
And the absurdist reply sort of zooms out from our parochial interests and says
Good.
nothing.
Yeah.
But there's
Good.
another way of just zooming out a bit and saying, look, these things matter, these things don't.
Yeah.
Art matters, etc.
Yeah.
And
Actually,
giving reasons why.
no, this is great. This is great. I think that this brings me to a really nice spot for sort of wrapping up the conversation. I think the way you said it in the beginning was really, really powerful, right? So, okay, we can have these absurdist worries, or we can have these epistemologically skeptical worries, right? But we also are confronted daily, probably
Right.
much more often, with the question of how should I live, right? We're
Right.
still confronted with that question. We're still confronted with the question of what do I know and what should I believe? And
Right.
so it's not like the absurdist worries makes the other problem about meaning go away, right?
Right.
And I think that this is a really important
Well,
point.
It does make it go away if you totally buy the absurdism.
Yeah, but
But that's
no
not
one
likely
can.
to, right, you're not
No
likely
one-
to buy it.
No one can, and we won't. And so I think, given that we won't or cannot, we can make certain assumptions, I think, in doing philosophy. We can table certain questions and even assume answers to them,
Right.
bracket them,
Yeah.
and do philosophy on the more parochial stuff in order to answer other really important, even foundational questions, right?
Right.
And I think that that's how ethics really gets off the ground at all, right? I mean, if
Right.
everyone took the problem of skepticism in epistemology seriously, we wouldn't do any other philosophy, really, right? But we don't, and I think that's a good thing, because we assume certain things can be answered, and we investigate other really, really important philosophical questions that we're really confronted with on a daily basis. So I think that we can do that here with the question of meaning. I think that we can
Right.
acknowledge Nagel's problem, but we can also, in some sense, bracket it and assume that it doesn't threaten things at the human level, and then
Right.
make distinctions and figure out really what makes a meaningful human life.
Right. That's the task, right? We want to work out what to do with our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
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 Well,
Sounds
on
good.
that note, I hope that you can work out what you want to do with your life and make it meaningful. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with my friend Jake Wojtowicz from King's College London, Dr. Wojtowicz, and I'll see you next time on Philosophy Jam.
Slithering along, nothing's on his mind. At the park with the family to find true happiness. The leaves are green and the fog is averted now. At the river,